So today we are going to continue with our goal of supporting our thinking using textual evidence. But today our focus is going to be on annotating text. Reading is a process, and annotation slows the reader down so that you have the ability to start uncovering some ideas. Let's take a look at how this is going to work. First, when you're going to annotate any kind of text, you want to start by considering the genre that you're working with. We're starting with short stories, fiction, and so we need to consider some very specific things. We know that short stories have setting and characters and problems, so we want to kind of get our mind ready for that. And as we read, we're going to be looking for important information on the setting and trying to find out who the main characters are, the important characters, and what these characters are like. It's definitely something that we want to look for when it comes to problem or conflict, and then paying attention to how that conflict is resolved. In reading fiction, we want to pay attention to the message or the theme that the author is sending us. When we start with the title, and we can start making some predictions as to what we think the story is going to be about based on that. To review, when we annotate a text, we definitely want to keep in mind our Super 6 comprehension strategies. Let's just take a moment to review those. Remember that successful readers make connections. As they read, we talked about the two voices, the voice that reads the words on the text, and then the voice that has the thoughts as you're reading, interacting with the text. Well, good readers, as they read, they make connections with the text. Remember that you can connect with the text by connecting with other books or stories you've read. You can connect the text to something in your life, text to self, or you might connect it to something that's going on in the world, a text-to-world connection. Good readers often make predictions as they read. And we also talked about how authors write implicitly, they don't come right out and say it, so good readers draw inferences, or they infer as they read. As you read through text, you may annotate questions that you have. Good readers, successful readers, also monitor as they read. We all come across words or ideas that we may struggle with during a text. So a successful reader stops or slows down, acknowledges that they're having trouble, and then they either try and figure it out or they use one of the fix-up strategies to get through the reading. Good readers also summarize and synthesize as they read a text. Summary, kind of restating what happens, and synthesize kind of digs a little deeper there. You are going to pull these big summary ideas, but you're kind of putting them together, and sometimes even connecting them with your background knowledge when you synthesize. And last, good readers evaluate or they make judgments. They may judge what a character does in a story, but they also may go a little bit bigger and they may judge some of the choices the authors made. Super 6 comprehension strategies are definitely things you need to keep in mind when you're annotating text. So let's look at specifically how this is done. Close reading, or annotation, starts by reminding yourself to read slowly. As you read, you underline ideas that spark those Super 6, ideas that create vivid images in your mind. You underline any vocabulary that you find interesting, important, or difficult to understand. You also want to underline any ways that the author kind of plays with language, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Those two thinking voices have to be represented. The text's already on the page, so you have to represent your thinking voice, and that's where your comments are going to come into play. When you underline something, you're going to want to go into the margin and then jot down why you underlined it. So you're going to expand that underline or highlighted part by showing us that thinking voice. Some readers find this difficult to do, to stop and comment every few lines. So another option is to read, underline when any of these things happen, and then go back and reread what you've underlined and comment at that time. Either way works just fine. Let's take a look at an example. Here is an excerpt from a short story entitled The Follower by Jack Gantos. Well, remember we said start with the title. And so when I see The Follower, I think about people, and I think about how sometimes people act as leaders and sometimes people act as followers. So the first thing I'm going to comment on is I'm going to say, well, if they're a follower, then they're not a leader. And so I'm going to jot that down next to the title, because I'm thinking it might be about a person that follows somebody or kind of copies somebody maybe. Let's jump into the text and see what's going on. My mother said he was trouble the first time I met him. Well, right there, I'm wondering who he is. I'm just going to underline that, but I'm guessing the author's going to tell me. And he does, right here. His name was Frankie Pagoda, and he had just been catapulted across the yard like a human cannonball and landed badly in hours. Okay, there's a lot going on in that sentence. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box Frankie Pagoda, and I'm going to make a little stick person, because I have been introduced to a pretty important character, I'm thinking. Then I'm going to underline this word catapulted. This word definitely helps me create a vivid image. I'm picturing one of those catapults that they used to put rocks in, and then you bend it back and it flies through the air. Definitely creates a different picture than the word just flies. So catapulted is a pretty strong word. He catapulted across his yard like a human cannonball. There's that plan language I was talking about. Like a human cannonball definitely gives me another image. And that plan language is a simile. He's comparing Frankie Pagoda to a human cannonball, like in the circus. And he landed badly in hours. Badly. Uh-oh. Is he hurt? He was moaning as soon as I stood over him, not knowing what to do. The underline moaning, because again, it goes to the question of, is he hurt? He was on his back, and at first, he wasn't moving. But slowly, he began to gyrate his arms and legs like a stunned crab. So I'm going to underline the word gyrate, because to me that is a very interesting vocabulary word. To be honest with you, I'm going to date myself here. I think of gyrate when I think of Elvis Presley shaking his hips. And I'm not picturing gyrate much with arms and legs. But the author helps me out here with this simile again, this plan language, like a stunned crab. So I'm going to put simile there. And that again is helping me to picture a crab on the beach that's been stunned and its kind of legs shake all over the place. Who are you, I asked. Frankie P., he slowly replied. Frankie Pagoda. He was in a lot of pain. That's pretty important. And here's what was going on. Oh, I like how the author sets that up. I'm going to judge that. I'm going to put, I like the author's style there. Whoops. I know something big is coming. His older brother, Scary Gary. Okay, boxing that character. Interesting name. Who had already been in trouble with the law. I'm going to underline trouble with the law, and I have a question like, how? How is he in trouble with the law? I'm also guessing Scary Gary is a nickname, so I'm going to put nickname over here, because that's my thinking. So the scary Gary had made him climb to the top of a reedy Australian pine tree with a rope between his teeth. Well, I'm going to put a question mark by reedy because I'm not sure I am visualizing that very well. And I'm going to underline Australian pine tree because I know what a pine tree is, but I don't know what the difference between like a pine tree in my yard and an Australian pine tree is, so I'm not quite visualizing that. I am thinking a rope between your teeth climbing to the top of a pine tree is a bad idea. So I'm going to jot that down. Then he tied the rope to the top of the tree, and Gary tied the other end to the winch on Mr. Pagoda's tow truck. Here I have some background knowledge. I know that a winch on a tow truck, or at least I think I know, is a hook. So I'm picturing that. He winched the tip of the tree. Now it's used as a verb. Here it's a noun. He winched the tip of the tree all the way down so it made a big spring. And then Frankie held on like a koala bear. All of these descriptions are really helping me visualize this. Here we have that play on language, another simile. I can just picture how a koala bear hangs on to its mother or to another tree where it wraps its arms and legs around. So that is how I'm picturing Frankie holding on to this Australian pine tree, while Gary cut the rope with a machete. Okay, now I know that a machete is a huge knife, and I'm wondering why a kid would have a machete. Frankie was launched, an active verb, like the stones the Romans flung at the Vandals. Again, that author is helping me by giving me this reference to a historical time when the Romans used to fight their enemies by launching stones. I was in my bedroom and Mom was in the kitchen. Both of us had windows that faced the backyard. Then we heard that first whoosh of the tree and Frankie hollering, "Ah!" That was followed by a thud and a very soulful moan. What a great descriptive word, because you can just hear the way that moan would sound. So I'm going to end here with my inference. Based on everything I've read here, I think at minimum Frankie has broken bones. Based on the author's wonderful descriptions here, I've got to guess that at least he's got broken bones at minimum. So here's an example, just a small excerpt that I've annotated for you. You're going to be practicing this in groups and then independently.